Before starting us is going to fix it, I like to say that 20 years ago, I've published, along with a colleague, an academic paper in the United States under the title, The Marketing of War in the Age of Neomilitarism. So then 5 years later, in other words, in 2009 or 10, something like that, the Routledge Publishing House has published my book, The Marketing of War in the Age of Neomilitarization. So thank you, David, for giving this lecture, tying, theoretical concepts and so on and so on. Anyway, what I like to say, my presentation is not related to an academic, theoretical, whatever you name it, presentation. It's strictly, I would say, practical. We have to elaborate, we have to understand, to conceptualize or so what's going on based on multilateralism. So, according to the United Nations, multilateral cooperation has held historical roots, and the modern form of multilateralism began to take shape with the Westphalian Treaties of 1648. In the 19th century, multilateralism reflected the growing complexity of international relations. The early 20th century saw the formal governance of multilateralism as nations sought to avoid further conflict. The creation of the United Nations in 1945 marked a new chapter in multilateralism, born from the ashes of World War II, with the goal of fostering peace, security, and development. Allow me, because I love art, and I have a friend, a very good colleague. She's a professor of arts, but most important, she's an artist, a painter. She's here, Sofia Hadjipapa. This is Guernica, as you know quite well, okay? So the 21st century is evidently shaped by geopolitical shift of intra-capitalist antagonisms, conflicts, and contradictions that ascend within the capitalist system itself, rather than among different social systems. The intra-capitalist antagonisms, conflicts, and contradictions threaten to disrupt the importance of multilateralism, which, despite its conceptual vagueness, is a foundation stone in the United Nations Charter for international cooperation, peace, and security through a universal approach. The current crisis of multilateralism is largely the output of the broader crisis of intra-capitalist antagonism, conflicts, and contradictions. At the beginning of the third decade of the 21st century, humanity is going through an agonizing period of manifold, high threat of perpetual crisis affecting multilateralism, and all states in the world politics together, and each of them individually. Overall, the Trump administration's actions to curb a new tariff regime and reshuffle global supply chains have also intensified tensions and calamities among states worldwide. The current, I will emphasize on this picture. The current crisis of multilateralism is strengthened by the many forms and or actors of pseudo-multiculturalism, which is labeled as multiculturalism, but is certainly unilateralism. The pseudo-multiculturalism serves only hegemonic capitalist interests. For instance, the United States has long abused sanctions to punish other countries and consequently formed groups, clubs, or cliques to promote a pseudo-multiculturalism, arbitrarily undermining the authority of the international system. For instance, the United States of America is using the camouflage of multiculturalism to gather its allies and partners to form exclusively groups, clubs, or even cliques, as I say, such as the Five Eyes, as Anglosphere intelligence and an Anglo-Saxon intelligence alliance. And please look at that. Look, they started, 5. They are 9 right now, and they are 14 under, I would say, the authority of the United States of America. So, which is an Anglosphere intelligence alliance. Now they have G7, we have G7, we have Indo-Pacific Quad Alliance, and we have the D10 Strategic Forum. In the Middle East, the United States has been establishing and expanding pseudo-multiculturalism mechanisms, such as the 2U2 group among the United States, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and India, as well as the Negev Forum, which includes the United States, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Egypt. Through regional expansion of pseudo-multilateralism mechanisms, the United States aims to counter the influence of Iran, Russia, and China, and ultimately to maintain its regional hegemony by using means of war economy. David was quite explicit in his presentation talking about the war economy. And militarization of politics, including NATO's interferences. The so-called Western nation states' hermeneutics and practices of multilateralism are concentrated on a facile form of multilateralism. In other words, coordination among 3 or more states based on certain principles. They ignore the connotations, geographies, and consequences of such activities. According to their interpretation, military alliances, NATO, small circles, groups like AUKUS, Quad, TSD, that are aimed at threatening specific countries are also multilateralism, in quotation marks, of course. Constitute a large anti-Chinese, that's the purpose, anti-Chinese coalition. For instance, with the AUKUS, the world is experiencing a geopolitical déjà vu. A geopolitical déjà vu, allow me to call it like this. As a plan of the project recalls, first of all, President Eisenhower's policy of nuclear cooperation between the United States and the United Kingdom, and 2, the launching of the 2 opium wars by the British Empire along with the dominant Western powers at that time. That's the perfect example of imperialism, not colonialism, imperialism, the way that Lenin explained. Marx's writings on the opium wars and capital accumulation in the global south are important texts to conceptualize pseudo-multilateralism. From many points of view, the 19th century opium wars are still relevant in analyzing how the United States, European Union, and NATO broadly impose de-risking and decoupling, as we're talking about de-risking and decoupling policies to Beijing and or geopolitically threaten modern China. Thus, with AUKUS, the United States is once pulling Australia along with the United Kingdom on the tracks not necessarily of the European Union, but certainly into the same rooted bloc of the Anglo-Saxon world. 85% of the world trade is carried by sea. 3/4 of the world's oil and gas reserves and supplies are extended from the sea and transported by the sea. 93% of the data used on the internet, social media, global financial transactions is carried by undersea cables. Overall, the United States' goal is to encircle China by sea. For instance, look at that. Here is how many American bases. How an American can feel if China, Greece, or even Cyprus go and establish so many bases around the United States? How can you feel, my friend? Anyway, I don't have time. I fully understand. Generally, the United States global strategy aims to defend and secure the hegemony of United States imperialism against China and rising competitors. All strategies are based directly or indirectly on maintaining the military strategic superiority of the United States, its hegemony within NATO structures, and on Washington's will and ability to impose its goals. Simultaneously, NATO, since the Cold War, has transformed into a vehicle for Western political military actions and influence in areas beyond NATO. For instance, NATO is strengthening dialogues and cooperation with the partners in the Indo-Pacific region, Australia, Japan, the Republic of Korea, and New Zealand. Overall, the United States and NATO led external interferences in the South China Sea and other regional hotspots have been arranged. This is the title by the New York Times. United States builds web of arms, ships, and bases in the Pacific to deter China. This is not my title, it's New York Times title. And this is and other similar practices violate the international order and norms. Such practices go also against the United Nations Charter, which is the basic international law, while undermine the United Nations as the core of the global system. The multilateral system is struggling to stay effective in the face of power equilibrium shift due to intra-capitalist antagonism, as I said previously. Consequently, the world is gripped by an increasingly intricate array of disputes and uncertainties. No country has the right to monopolize international affairs. In 2021, President Xi Jinping advocated the principle of multilateralism at the BoD Forum for Asia Annual Conference. This principle has gradually acknowledged while backing from the international community, since it endorses inter alia solidarity and cooperation among countries around the world. To uphold true multilateralism, all nation states should resolutely uphold the authority and standing of the United Nations, support extensive consultation, joint contribution and share benefits, develop a better equilibrium in international relations, and oppose unilateralism as well as all forms of fake multilateralism. In the new historical context, China's incorporated global initiatives track a steady and sustained progress for cooperation globally, including South Mediterranean and Middle East countries. Overall, China's engagement in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Mediterranean has steadily grown as Western dominance declined. All sides, in the spirit of true multilateralism, should work together to build a global community of shared future. And the world needs real multilateralism. So Cyprus, North America, and the Middle East need a real and equal multilateral cooperation. President Xi put forward the Global Civilization Initiative, reflecting Beijing's vision as well as the path that China has set to deal with others in the spirit of an ordinary multipolar world to achieve and explore diversified cultural routes towards modernization. Generally speaking, the Chinese Global Civilization Initiative as a cultural engagement builds and strengthens a multipolar world, a global community of common destiny, and third, mutual learning types to advance the progress of human civilizations. Under the weight of global competition and constitution of international norms, the European Union is adapting multilateralism. However, European Union's adoption takes the form of multilateralism à la carte. Meanwhile, the European Union's influence in the multilateral system is minor, considering its economic, regulatory, financial, and diplomatic resources. Similarly, the emerging multilateralism à la carte, enforced by European Union governance institutions, leads to limits or fragmentation of global cooperation. And this is quite dangerous, given that today's rising far-right movements in the European Union's politics, characterized by chauvinism, xenophobia, and racism, the Chinese Global Civilization Initiative is of imminent value for people in Europe and therefore cannot be disregarded by Brussels. Cyprus should resist European Union instructions that neglect synergies with China. Cyprus must strengthen China's Global Civilization Initiative by actively participate for the formation of an equal multipolar world. And concluding remark, if I have a minute or 2 minutes, safeguarding true multilateralism means discarding unilateralism or various forms of pseudo-multilateralism and averting the world communities from sliding towards a new Cold War. In our interconnected world, any form of unilateralism or excessive weight on one's own interest will ultimately hit a dead end. Upholding true multilateralism means upholding the status of the United Nations for global peace. In today's global challenges, along with the confrontational and/or destructive United States geopolitical agenda, China's role is vital to Europeans. Europeans need to generate either a closer cooperation and/or a new framework for engagement with Beijing. The Global Civilization Initiative builds bridges among cultures and thus contributes to human progress. Thank you. Ευχαριστώ.